Hi, this is Edward Freytag with Roll-Off Productions. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the 4 basic elements that are required to play most rudimental snare drum literature. Those elements are the full stroke, the tap, the grace note, and the diddle. To begin, let's talk first about the full stroke, or the accent. The accent, or the full stroke, should be executed in its beginning stages approximately 7 or 8 inches off the drum, with a lift from the wrist, coming up so, back down into the drum head. Try to make this feel as natural as possible. If you're a traditional grip player, you want to mirror the stick height in the left hand with that in the right. Again, to make it feel natural, feel free to lift the forearm slightly while you're rotating the wrist. When you put the 2 hands together, it's basically the execution of the accent. The tap is very similar in execution than the accent, except obviously for the height. The tap in the beginning stages, you might want to experiment with about maybe a 3 to a 2 inch stroke. Again, same technique, lifting from the wrist slightly. Together. Controlling the tap is actually more difficult than controlling the accent. Most young drummers find the tap very difficult to keep in tempo. So it's very important that you work these with a metronome, particularly in the early development stages of these techniques. When you start putting these 2 elements together, the accent and the tap, you can come up with a great variety of patterns just with alternate sticking. For example, faster velocity. Again, the importance lies in trying to keep the accents the same height, at the same time keep the taps or the inner notes the same height. Making sure that the accents are the same height and the taps remain the same height will give a greater clarity in the difference between the 2 particular strokes. The grace note. The grace note is very similar to the tap, with the exception of you do not raise the wrist or actually lift into the technique. The technique actually drops from the playing position. For example, with the left hand, the same. Now, usually the grace note is going to be connected to a main note. The main note can possibly be a tap. More than likely, it's going to be an accent or a full stroke. When you put the 2 together, the grace note comes first, slightly before the main note. It will look and sound something like this. Or the left side. Alternating. In today's rudimental world, there's quite a debate over how open this particular rudiment ought to be played. Most of the time, if you're playing in a drum line, they'll encourage you to play them very tight. That's so the group will sound relatively clean. You might execute them in this fashion. There's barely an audible distinction between the grace note and the main note. If you are a soloist, you might opt to play them a little bit more open. Most drum set players will use the latter technique. There's also the diddle. The diddle is a controlled double bounce in a single hand. It's usually executed by playing 1 stroke, allowing the stick to bounce on the 2nd stroke, and controlling it with the back fingers, such as this. Same technique in the left hand. Now, even though the stick is bouncing, I'm in full control of the stick itself by using the back fingers on the right hand and the first and third and the thumb fulcrum on the left hand. When you combine these diddles together, you obviously have a double stroke roll. Which is throughout most rudimental music. Now, with those four elements, the accent, the tap, the grace note, and the diddles, you can pretty much navigate most rudimental literature. Of course, there are some specialty things that will occur and some odd combinations of those. But again, those are the four basic elements.